Fidelity preparing to apply for a spot Bitcoin ETF as well, a source tells the block. Bitcoin pumped a little bit on the news, it should be noted, and this is a continuation of a recent trend where big old financial institutions are trying to get a spot Bitcoin ETF into the hands of US consumers. Really interesting to see a lot of momentum around the Bitcoin ETF when previously that conversation had been quite dead. What do they know? What do they know about the particular timing here? That really is the interesting thing. I'm going to throw it straight to Will. I saw him raising his hands in jubilation now that the institutions are back on the Bitcoin ETF train.
Let's
go. Fidelity is here. What do you think, Will?
I'm loving it. Fidelity has $4.5 trillion of assets under management. This, of course, follows up on the BlackRock ETF, which CoinDesk broke, and a few other companies last week re-upped their ETF bids, which have been swatted down left and right by the SEC over the last few years. But it is ETF season, and we are pumping on the news. We love that. Bitcoin's over 30K. Right? I think it is, right? It's over 30K. Pretty sure it is. That's great
over
news
30.
for all.
Yeah.
Well over 30K. Okay. That's great news, guys. Everyone should be all smiles today. Fidelity itself has been a longtime Bitcoin proponent, or at least interested in Bitcoin. A lot of the more prominent people in the Bitcoin space actually came from Fidelity, like Amanda Fabiano, who now runs mining over at Galaxy Digital, or Nick Carter, who's now an investor at Castle Island Ventures. A few other people, the Fidelity gang, as they're well known. So Fidelity throwing their hat into the ring would not surprise me. Now, to the media side of this is a source, right? So we have one lone source from the block, similar to the CoinDesk article, right? Where CoinDesk had a few sources, was able to put this together. So I'm interested to see, one, if this is confirmed, which as of right now, we do not have any confirmation or any comment from Fidelity. And two, later, how this comes out, right? Like who's the partner or who's the person who sort of leaked this. Oftentimes we never find out who this is. Maybe a few years later we do find out. It's whispered in circles, but normally people who have a financial incentive are the ones who are leaking this information. So we'll see what happens there. Jen?
Yeah, so Fidelity is also one of the investors in EDX Markets. That's the exchange that launched, I think it was last week. They have Bitcoin, Ether, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash available for institutional investors. And the markets have just really been reacting to this very institutional news. Like I said yesterday, now that Fidelity's thrown their hat in the ring, you just have to feel like somebody knows something the rest of us don't. So Fidelity has applied for an ETF before. I believe that some of the other players that filed after BlackRock also have filed before. And now we have them filing the second time right after BlackRock files. It just feels very bullish. But then again, that's just a feeling. There is no information to back any of that up. It's very possible that the SEC does not let these applications go through. I love what's happening in the markets. I love the conversations that this is spurring. So I hope it happens. Our markets guest on First Mover this morning said that he predicts the next bull cycle to start if one of the ETFs does get approved. He was saying if it does get approved, he's thinking that Bitcoin will hit $40,000 by the end of the year. I think all of the bullish people probably are sharing similar sentiment, but I hate to be the Debbie Downer. I think it's important to zoom out and look at what's going on in the macro environment before we say the next bull cycle is coming, because all of these ETFs are being filed. And the last thing I will say before I hand this off to you again, Will, is Canada has had an ETF for a really long time. And I need to say it every time. We've been there in Canada. And so maybe that's why I can share a dance with you, but maybe I'm not that excited.
We're not interested in the Canada shilling this morning.
Nope.
We just want to talk about Bitcoin. Okay, really quick, I want to go over to Eric Alcunas. I think I just butchered his last name, but he's an ETF reporter over at Bloomberg. He's sort of been covering this whole space, right? Because normally ETFs are pretty boring. It's like, oh, congrats, you raised like a 0.5 percentage point today. That's basically what they're covering. But when a Bitcoin ETF comes to town, it gets really exciting because you get to interact with crypto Twitter. And he's been talking about it for quite a little bit because of what happened with CoinDesk breaking the news about the BlackRock ETF. Right now, he's noticing that there might be a higher percentage chance that a Bitcoin ETF does go through because of the litigation between Grayscale and the SEC. Grayscale has been suing the SEC, trying to allow a conversion of its trust into an ETF. And after oral hearings and arguments, the Bloomberg team assigned a 70% chance that ETF does go through because of the courts. Now, with this information that Fidelity and BlackRock and others are pushing forward, he's thinking that you might see a chance that the SEC backpedals on their argument with Grayscale by allowing one of these other ETFs to go through, which is really interesting anecdote here. Like, if that does happen, that would be pretty fascinating to see the SEC be like, okay, we don't care about this argument in court anymore because we're just going to let these other ETFs slide through, and then the whole market opens up all at once. So that is one thing to keep an eye on. Zach?
Yeah, and it becomes sort of like a loss in name only, right? It's a way for the SEC to save face on the Grayscale suit because, again, Bloomberg ETF and analysts, they do this all the time. They say there's like a 70% shot that the Grayscale wins. It's feud with the SEC. If the SEC can act and say, okay, well, we've approved a Bitcoin ETF, this point is moot, it doesn't really become like a loss in court in a way that could tarnish maybe the political reputation of Gary Gensler, who seems to have greater aspirations. I think with the Fidelity one, and obviously this detail is not yet known, but it really comes down to this market surveillance sharing agreement, right? The surveillance sharing agreement with the BlackRock application is really key for assuaging a lot of the SEC's stated concerns around spot Bitcoin price manipulation, right? So if the Fidelity application has some similar language about surveillance sharing, I think that could be a deciding factor as to which one gets approved and which ones continue to languish. So it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, when Fidelity comes out, or if this application gets filed later today or in the coming days, what the specifics are, such that we have a better understanding of which of this new crop of applications is most likely to win approval. So we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, interesting to see another big name come into the space with this application.